for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved, divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video with me here today. And as I've promised, this is the second video of what I was talking about most recently about the galactic perspective and the human evolution. And this one will focus more on the integration of the light being. So I was talking about what the light being integration is a little bit in my past two videos actually. One was the 8-8 gateway video, which started this whole conversation up. And I want to just move deeper into understanding how this physical ascension journey that is happening now, which is new, is a configuration of something that hasn't yet happened before in terms of the evolution of human form. So our bodies that are receiving the light being. So the counterpart of spirit being anchored within our bodies. So if you think of the nature of spirituality as of the late, you have many spiritual teachers or gurus or enlightened beings who talk about the whole nature of enlightenment and achieving a state of bliss or samadhi, and almost like that is the ultimate journey, right? That is where it all ends once you are enlightened. However, enlightenment in itself and ascension are not the same things. Enlightenment is a preceding experience to the journey of physical ascension that doesn't necessarily lead into one becoming physically ascended or truly embodying the descent of their light being or that divine merging of spirit and matter. The journey of ascension, which is a physical component of sacred alchemy, is a much more challenging journey than just naturally achieving a state of enlightenment. Many beings who are undergoing a physical ascension journey, they're already enlightened, and they perhaps don't feel like very enlightened because they still experience the challenges. And they don't always live in a state of constant bliss or samadhi, you know, like that constant tantric bliss. And although that of course is the ultimate, in our current day, in this modern age, you know, the crazy world, this world of sometimes, you know, looking around just thinking, what is this all about? You know, it's very challenging to just think of the self as an isolated being who doesn't really care about what's happening with the rest of the world, because all that matters is that you achieved your own samadhi. So you can be somewhere in a cave or in a retreat. You know, nowadays we have so many retreats around the world, especially the Westerners who are building all these super retreat centers in the East, resort locations like Bali, Indonesia, India even, you know, that are offering that to a lot of people who come there in order to reach certain states of enlightenment or yogic, sattvic states, different bodhisattvic states. However, to be in a retreat in terms of relating it to an external experience, to be in a retreat center, is not the same as achieving a physically you know, ascended state where your body becomes a sacred retreat in itself. So you can have and be in that space, beautiful location somewhere, retreated from the rest of the world, and yet an ascending experience in physicality is one that, from a galactic perspective, again, because this is what we're addressing here in these videos, it takes place, you know, in a different way, because once you're connected and awakened galactically, you know, not just in several different states of your human nature and becoming humanly enlightened, connects you to a bigger picture of life, to a greater design of life in which, if not all are free, no one is free, truly. You know, we are working towards the entire galaxy becoming galactically free and independent as she moves into her new cycle. So I was asking yesterday in a meditation, what does it truly mean, you know, for us who are on the journey of physical ascension, who are undergoing these light beings transmutations and transfigurations that are all a result of our enlightening transformations, right, that we already have been moving through for several years. And many of you who are maybe of the older generation you've definitely been here for quite a long time, and you know this is not just about becoming enlightened and then, you know, leaving Earth or teaching others, and you're always having a smile on your face because you realize that there's something, you know, bigger happening. And you see many of these teachers, they never address the state of what's happening in terms of a greater region, not just planetary. They all talk about the inner conflicts, the inner duality resolution, or the inner split, which is great. You know, this is where we begin. But it's not where the journey of ascension truly ends. So the journey of physical ascension, and especially serving the plan for divine ascension and illumination of all beings, you know, in form, not just in our consciousness, because enlightenment is a state of consciousness, doesn't necessarily affect your form. A lot of yogic teachers were very enlightened, however, their form did not achieve a state of full illumination. So now, physical ascension journey does not happen without that galactic awareness, without the galactic presence within you, which in a natural sense already is a direct translation and correspondence with your light being, which is your inner spirit dweller. So when you think about that, you realize that this is just the beginning stage of the journey, and it doesn't end there. So yesterday, like I said, I was implying and I wanted to go there, and here I am now going there. I had this question in mind, and I said, in physical ascension is really all about the state of bliss. And my family of light, or the Elohim companions, gave me this impression that it's almost like it's a divine trinity. Because those of us who are in this path, especially those spirit dwellers who are here as illumined beings, who have sometimes an immense responsibility to share this path and how it truly is, as beings, souls who are very much evolved, are undergoing their own understanding of this. We have this mission of paving the way forward. We have to bring the messages forth that are not always apparent in our status quo, even in terms of spiritual communities and New Age teachings. So what they gave me, they said it's a divine trinity of responsibility, love for what you're actually responsible for, and then the joy that is a natural offspring of that union. So in a way, illumined union does involve a sense of responsibility. So if we want to take responsibility out of the game, out of this divine equation, we can be in total bliss all the time. That's what they gave me. They said you could be already fully always in bliss, but because you choose and you're galactically awake to assist the awakening of many into galactic presence and awareness, which, like I said, most of these enlightened teachers, they don't talk about. They don't talk about the Luciferian agenda or dark beings from Orion and things like that, you know. They're not speaking from a perspective of the entire galaxy in the shifting times, because they have different purposes here. So galactic beings that are galactic presences who, however, we do have the kind of presence and understanding that these are not just myths, that they are archetypes, that, you know, wherever they're happening in the galaxy, they're happening within every template of living life expression in existence. So Earth is in being this almost like a pod, like it looks like a mini pod, and yet it's grandiose in a way that, although it's a tiny planet in a way, for us it's big, right? Because we're small ourselves. It's actually inhabited by so many different diverse beings. So naturally, there are beings who are saying this is how it is, and it is how it is for them. And they're saying the enlightenment is the ultimate experience you can have, or that you can achieve before you pass on to the next stage or the octave of experience. For many people, that's true because they're experiencing enlightenment for the first time, and that's all they're focused upon. However, beings who are galactic presences, they do feel a heavier or a bigger or a wider experience of what it's called to be galactically awake. So naturally, they will feel a bigger pressure of that feeling, naturally, like a responsibility. And you can't take that out of the equation because you're birthing something bigger than just your own life and your own enlightenment. So I was reading this book called the Pleiadian Tantric Workbook, and in the beginning it starts with this beautiful story of one of the experiences of the fall, where in their tantric union, this couple called Eros and Aurea, they actually bring forth a lot of life, living creations. And as a result of their union, the masculine aspect, right, the Eros, he suddenly states that he doesn't want to be responsible for the forms that they actually help to birth and co-create. He just wants to experience the tantric union and bliss within themselves, right? What they share as a higher divine orchestration coupling. And because of that, eventually that leads to a fall, because he no longer feels that to be important. So he deflects, he strays off the path, and he starts to become an overarching presence, but in a way that's dark and controlling, right? So he takes certain beings, the fairy beings, and he takes them onto this planetary system and our solar system, and eventually, you know, they are seated here on Earth as well. This is a whole different story, though, although all stories, as you know, in the grand design, they're all intertwined and interconnected and influencing each other. However, today we have to get, you know, closer to what we're talking about here. So how does this relate to what I'm sharing here? So the more overarching presence you have, the bigger your power, the more responsibility you have. However, you as an over-illuminating presence, because a lot of beings now ready to evolve to that state, they're becoming more illumined in their form as well. So they might feel that with this comes a responsibility, and maybe that perhaps inhibits some to walk this path because it just feels too heavy. It's too much work. So they rather go astray and do something else that's more simple, right? Just travel the world and forget this exists. It's a possibility, right? But let's say we don't have a world to travel anymore. Let's say the world goes extinct. I mean, the populace on the planet, or, you know, maybe perhaps even the whole planet itself, like Maldek once did. We take things so much for granted, right? But that's not our topic today, so let's go back to it. The responsibility, once it's growing in its awareness, right? You're expanding yourself, and you're aware more and more of things in life and creation. Wow, this design. So if that sense of responsibility is not met with love for what you're responsible for, or feeling responsibility towards, there will naturally be an imbalance, right? This is what occurred in that story of creation I just shared with you from that book. That when you naturally have love that supports that sense of responsibility, joy will be a natural response. Even beings of great, how to say that, optimum essence of how much life force they can carry and transmit and translate into the presence of creation itself, to sustain different varieties of life in terms of how consciousness moves into form, even they can fall. Every being is prone to experiencing a fall of sorts. No being is immune to what the fall means, because the fall can occur anytime you actually move out of balance. So that's why the integration of the light being is so important, because it talks about the right amount, the right percentage of that precipitation of light being that is spirit meeting form, so that there is no deflection created along the way, because that sense of balance is sort of off. This is a huge topic they're presenting to me right now, so we will actually make it a Patreon monthly course, because on my Patreon page called Illumined Ascension, we do these monthly courses that are supportive for what I'm moving through, what I'm being shown, and what is most important to integrate at this time through first our consciousness, and then the body, the form that always follows consciousness. So the integration of the light being is a vast thing. And they were showing me just recently how, because of these new experimentations, because this new impulse, which we talked about in the previous video, is in a way creating different responses. Imagine like the cellular system, which functions in a certain way, had to rearrange completely. That's why I talked about the cellular reconfiguration in my 8-8 Gateway video with an audiobook recommendation that I just recently channeled. It's a 1-hour-long journey of complete emphasis on this, the project of illumination, the light beings, and how this cellular reconfiguration, a physical repatterning, is being created now in our physical forms throughout the process of our illumined ascension. So as a result of that, in shifting these templates, it's like we're being guided differently. Everything is changing. The internal navigation system, so the cells literally have to go from this way of being into a completely different way of being, and in between, which is that transition state, which is the most challenging and most vulnerable period for a human being that can exist at all. It has nothing to do, or even how we can compare it with something like enlightenment. It cannot be compared, and because it's so radically challenging, most people won't choose it. And yet once you choose it, you will master something so profound that through the art of this sacred alchemy, through physical ascension, you get to assist other planetary regional developments as well, eventually. So that's the gift, that's the bonus, right? And growing in your power in a way that's not controlling, but humbly serving the divine creation and divine will in life and creation. So imagine that, right? That shift taking place. Now we're experiencing the end of the 26,000-year-old cycle, which is the cycle of our sun revolution, revolving around the star of Alcyon, which is the central sun in Pleiades, which we're a naturally belonging star together with, right? A part of that constellation and spiral of creation. But we're also experiencing a different movement around the galaxy. So the galaxy herself is shifting into a new pattern, a new aspect or chapter in creation. So it's another whole huge cycle of creation. The birds are really loud right now, trying to outrun me or outdo me. Shh, you know. Yeah, shh, shush. I'm trying to say something here. Yeah, things like that sometimes cause disturbances, but I'm going back to my topic now. So imagine in between this stage, right? It was anticipated that our forms would naturally follow consciousness, but it wasn't so, right? And this is what we talk about in this month's Patreon course about physical body transfiguration and actually a reconfiguration of the cellular nature and what to do to assist our bodies in the process. So that was the theme of this month. So we have a mini audiobook talking about this, as well as the course I shared on Patreon. And next month we're going to do a deeper delving into this understanding of the light being integration. So they were showing me that the integration of the light being is like a natural blending, a natural merging that occurs within this movement into the next stage, or the spiral, within the spiraling nature of the galaxy herself. So as she's impressing this new chapter, she's giving this new vision, she's impulsing a new life form for herself. We're all in a way of receiving it, but it's not that it just happens automatically within the galaxy. It does, but when the template was placed and moved into the Earth's core, now the Earth herself begins to respond, and she is already responding, and then naturally the populace on Earth starts to respond as well. What they gave me was very interesting. They said a lot of people who are very Earth connected from a very, we would say, almost like evolutionary developmental stage. I'd say people who are very connected with Earth, they don't necessarily have to have any knowledge of ascension or enlightenment, but they're so connected with the Earth that when the pulse of life in this new template comes and it starts to emanate from the Earth's core, they would naturally feel it, so they would again become a part of this natural evolutionary spiral. However, people who are not earthed or grounded through love, in love with Gaia and her essence, they move upwards because they sort of render life as less important, right? Physical life, physicality in itself, because they're so out of this world, or they're better than, they're moving off the ground almost, so to say. They can't feel this directly, and that's where dangers and pitfalls of the New Age lie, because they're trying to unearth a lot of souls out of what's happening now in order for them to experience illumination very naturally once it's imbued in the Earth's core. So the beings who had this mission, including myself, it was a very difficult journey. And when I asked, what does this mean to bring this pulse directly, which is what we've talked about in the previous video, right? And they said to bring it directly means that you are a part of that where the pulse is. So it's like aspects of the pulse, aspects of creation herself, divine mother, father essences, which are divine creator beings, send impulses or impressions of their essences into this given form right now in creation. So we live in these bodies, seemingly human, and yet they're not. They're a conglomeration of human DNA and galactic presence, or DNA, right, which is a light-fueled DNA. It's a liquid light formation. So they were showing me that in the process, those of us who had this mission to bring this divine vision, because we have it, because we come from that origin, we come from the essence where those visions are being modulated through what I shared with you. Like, it's like working with the refinement of life force and sending it through different operational systems. So it's a configuration that has always the optimum flow and results to sustain living worlds in life and creation. So they said, because we know we have that vision, it's not a filtered vision, or it's a condensed vision, or a falsified vision. It's so pure, and that's what we ourselves are, the seed. So when I asked what that seed is, they said, you are the seed itself. It's in you. And we talked about in the previous video also about Lucifer and his agenda. So they were giving me something very funny. But they said because this was new and we're trying this out now, they said it's an interesting thing that beings who fall and they're very much controlling, and they start rendering also life in matter as less than, and they think they need to control it because it's not capable of evolving in its own terms, right? And very naturally, so they need to control it, and through their ideas and thoughts and impressions of how that's supposed to be in evolution. So for them, a being of such greatness, like they think of themselves or their fellow beings, but let's say they're not controlling aspects of life, they show me like this. It was a quick instant knowing. It was almost like a great being taking form, like we were seeding aspects of ourselves into these bodies. They always show me like to beings like Lucifer, that's almost like, you know, like less than. And that's, they said that's his downfall, because he thinks that as so disempowering, so pathetic in a way. Like, how can a great being come into form and just be a part of being human? That's just disgusting. That's what they're showing me, and they were laughing, and I was laughing as well. I was like, why did you give me this? And my light family said, because in a way, ego potentialized from a great deity who was once able to hold life, you know, revolving around the solar system. I said for them to have that fall, to think as life is less than and start to think in controlling ways and terms, there's always going to be a setback. And eventually something, your own ego, bringing an end to you in those terms of control, eventually you yourself becoming your downfall, the way you think, the way you control. And those were actually, they said, these were our solutions because it was something unpredictable. Because if you judge something as so, you know, like, oh, that's so disempowering. How can this being like this, who takes up a human form in this way, how can they, you know, even compare with what I'm doing? That's what they're showing me. And they were saying because of that, there's a blind spot in your vision and you can't see the real meaning and importance. And that's usually, that's where the light team, the team of Illumined Light has the focus now, and rolling of the ball. And through the integration of the light being in form, which we do first ourselves, and then humans who are evolved souls first after us, well, simultaneously, I'm going to say parallel with us, because it's not, you know, I lead, you follow. It's more like a parallel unfolding, you know, let me say it like this. I hope that makes better sense, because sometimes it's difficult to put things in a timeless nature, in a time-framed way and format. So this was the design, and although, you know, it was seen, it could be seen from such a controlling perspective as less than, and so not important, they told me, you have more power than you think you do by claiming human bodies, by taking up human form this way. So the light being integration is something that will continuously be talked about now. It will be, like I said, the next month's course on Patreon. So there's a lot they were showing me. I was also asking, what's the appropriate way of how much of the light being and how much of the human, how to say, even personality and so, because I've been noticing a lot of changes in my own being, and I was a little confused. And I said, well, what's going to be the right blending, like the right merging that has that optimum way? And they said this is still being experimented with, but they said at the end we will be able to choose. Each being, according to their own evolutionary state, will choose how much of their light being will precipitate and come into their physical form in terms of percentages of what will feel just the right amount for them. They said it will be a very flexible thing, because Illumined Union is not something that's controlling and static and linear. It will give beings a breathable way of experiencing life, just learning to design their own experiences in a free-based way, because now there wasn't much freedom with all the control and the oppression and resistances built from that control. So if you want to start doing your work, I really advise you to perhaps take up this beautiful book called the Pleiadian Workbook, because it's based on the teachings of Awakening Your Divine Ka, which is your spirit body. It is by Aurea. The second book is about the soul nature, which is more tantric teachings for awakening your divine Ba, which is the soul body. So you have spirit and the soul, and then there's this blending with our earthiness, or the inner child, the dweller is the spirit meeting the inner dweller and just becoming one dweller, basically. So the confusion I was feeling was because there's a lack of experience here, because this is new, and they said this is new, right? Hello, B. It is new from the way that the way it's being done. Like I said, through this galactic new impulse, shifting of the template, writing that new template into the core of the earth, core of Gaia. So it takes a lot of work, and it's not all about the light. Like I said, beware of those who only speak of the nature, how everything is light, because they're only giving you one aspect of the story, and perhaps they don't know that they themselves are still locked in duality, because they perpetuate only one side of the story. The integration through illumined union can only take place like one step at a time. Like light takes a step, dark takes a step, light takes a step, and dark takes another step. And that's their blending. That's the eventual merging of that unity, because through light we activate and through dark we integrate, and that's the most simple, like an epitome of life in a most simplistic way of truth that is illumined, that's not fragmented in any way, and it's not, you know, just keeping things in separate boxes. So these two books I highly recommend, both of these works, Pleiadian Workbook and Tantric Workbook, and we will do more in the Patreon course. What else to say here? I want to read you some paragraphs as well from the Pleiadian perspectives on human evolution. Have some goodies here. Yeah, I want to start with, again, with the galactic cycle that's changing now, so that you can have more perspective. But as always, you know, these are just bits and fragments, and it's other people's work. If you want to support other people's work, I suggest you buy the book. And my work is also work, so I suggest you to also support my work if you feel that unconditional exchange of energy, which is always how things flow in the universal scheme of things. So you can support my work by visiting my page, getting an audio book, download a course, whatever, you know. I do have donations available, but like I said, I prefer that people are learning along the way as well, because I created lots of tools to demonstrate that, and people have to begin somewhere. And they said it's difficult for the people because there's a lack of knowledge at this time of what's actually taking place, and the confusion of people, it's leaving them still in the old. They're feeling the inner changes and urges, but they don't know where to begin. So everything I was preparing for such a long time, it cannot be compared with something that already was. Like they said, this is new. So since the harmonic convergence, which we now have exactly anniversary of, right? It's on 17th of August every year. And it's around circular, spiraling, round tour kind of thing, because it does influence us. It reverberates, right? The energy is there and we can feel it. And usually for me in my life, always big unfoldings occur in terms of illumination on harmonic convergence anniversary. So yeah, very important date. August is always a super important star-born month. But like I said, this is new, and since harmonic convergence, we've been building pathways towards establishment of these new illumined teachings again, that don't just focus on individual enlightenment, but the illumination of a physical form, because that's a new format. Okay, so I will start with describing from the book about the orbital patterns of the galaxy, which you can further read here in the book itself, but I'll read only aspects. So the orbits of the entire Milky Way around the great central sun, just like the orbits of your solar ring around Milky Way's galactic center, take the form of continual circles connecting with diagonal arms at the end of one circle and beginning of another. At the completion point of the circular orbit around the great central sun of all that is, the Milky Way galaxy enters a diagonal connecting link to the next ring on the spiral, which is an initiatic step into a new evolutionary cycle as well. This is what is occurring now. You, the people of Earth, are not only at the end of a 26,000-year Earth-Sun Pleiadian cycle, the entire Pleiadian system, which includes your solar ring, is at the end of a, let's say, 230 million, I think, year orbit around galactic center, and the entire Milky Way is at the completion of an infinitely longer orbit around the great central sun. So imagine that. All cycles concurrently completing themselves. All three of these cycles are synchronistically and simultaneously completing the last step of the spiral dance within a dance, within a dance, right? Making this a very crucial transition time The objective is to finish without anyone's toes getting stepped on, so the next more sophisticated and gracious dance can begin. So now this previous galactic cycle, which says here that is now ending, and basically did end, but we, like I said, we still have the resistance towards that. It is called the evolutionary spiral of self-discovery and exploration. That's why we had so much duality and mirroring for that ultimate experience to be gained. The new galactic cycle we're entering is called the evolutionary spiral of self-mastery and completion. The consciousnesses birthed during these transitional times are the products of new paradigms and new potentials, and benefit from all of the learning from the previous spiral, even if it is unconscious. It is like taking all of the dance steps learned in the previous lessons, mastering them, and then adding new steps that are much more exciting and challenging. So a part of that self-mastery will be about, you know, all the experiences you gain, how can they assist you in becoming a total creator of yourself, like creating our bodies in an ascended way, creating ripple effects through our own ascension, being aware of every single ripple effect we have, personal, interpersonal, interplanetary, all of that. Yes, that's one thing. The other thing is about Earth's divine plan prepared for and implemented, that's described in the book. The culmination of every initiate's training, it's about the temple training, right? That was created as the seed for eventually reaching that state of enlightenment and ascending. So it was concluded with the choice to ascend and become higher dimensional guides and masters, or to commit to serving Earth in human form. So then it talks about the three different groups that exist, within which within these three groups initiates fell. These were three categories. One group consisted of those who would ascend and become higher dimensional guides and master teachers for evolving humans. These beings might rarely choose to precipitate a physical body for a specific purpose in their service, but they need not take on karmic patterning, so only imprints for their experience if they do come into form, through which they utilize their understanding of current lifetimes. A second group would complete the initiatic path and become enlightened 3 more times prior to completion on Earth between 1995 and 2013. 2 of these enlightenments would take place in female bodies and 2 in male bodies. During the procession of their lives, they would take on a primary karmic pattern and myth and transcend it in 2 different spiritual paths. Once as a male and once as a female in each one. Ascension or conscious death would be their final step. Many of these beings would experience physical death or ascension during Earth changes in order to assist others into the light. What is the new cycle, like I said, the new impulse is to achieve ascension while you're fully in the body, in the illumination of physical human form. That's the imprint, or sorry, the impulse that we brought here from the new galactic plane awareness, that, you know, it's consistent with that new cycle that the galaxy stepped into. And because it's so new, as you see, this is 2013, we're now in 2019, just a few years is like nothing, you know, galactically speaking. So they're telling me that this is just a template. The template will be there for all to experience, you know, really much according to their own evolution. It's like it hasn't even been a flicker yet, but it's being planted through us here. We are the seed. A third group was comprised of those who would take on 7 specific solar ring karmic themes and transform and transmute them through numerous lifetimes. So then it describes this, how this looks, and it was about the balance between male and female energies internally and externally that had to be attained now in order for Earth and her people to meet their next evolutionary steps. So although there was a sacredness and equanimity between both genders in Lemuria, it was a primary goddess-based spiritual civilization, and Atlantis was a male, God-based civilization. And now we are in for a time for spirituality based on God, Goddess, and all that is, that acknowledges and practices equanimity, sovereignty, and transcendence of duality. In order to ascend, a being must have balanced his or her inner male and female energies and surrendered into divine oneness with all that is. Okay, So then it talks about those who were chosen and were chosen for the third Lemurian path of 7 ascensions prior to leaving Earth would do so in 7 of the following cultures and spiritual paths. And then it talks about Lemuria, Atlantis, Egypt, Maya, Inca, Aztec, Machu Picchu, Aboriginal Australia, India, Goddess, Druid groups in Europe, England, Buddhism, Christ consciousness, Bali. You know, I'm almost like making it into a song so much. And smaller indigenous spiritual communities around the world as Hopi, Native American, African, South and Central American tribes, and so on. So prior to the 7th ascension, a blending and remembering of all the previous 6 ascension experiences occurs. The final ascension takes place when the other 6 spiritual paths have become fully integrated into the body consciousness, and the body consciousness must be fully aligned in the pillar of light with all 9 dimensional aspects of the person's higher consciousness. And for those of you who don't know, they explain this at the last part. What are these 7 basic karmic patterns as well as vices? So we have in our solar system, these karmic patterns were developed through colonization on all of the planetary stations that experience life and life forms. They are arrogance, addiction, prejudice, hatred, violence, victimhood, and shame. These are the primary subconscious and conscious karmic vices that were developed on Venus, Mars, Maldek, and Earth. There are also 7 ego allurements that are specific to Earth, which are lust, laziness, gluttony, pride, anger, envy, and greed. These last 7 are specifically the traps of the negative ego. This negative ego is the aspect of your personality that refuses to surrender to spirit, wants to be in control, keeps you feeling separate, and wants you to feel special. Doesn't it feel good to feel special? Sitting here doing the videos. Kidding, guys. So it does not matter whether you feel better than or less than, as long as you feel special, right? You're different in a way. The only way of feeling special that is probably, if I can say the correct way of feeling special, is that you understand that life in itself is special, that each time, each new cycle is so special and precious because of that. And when we align with that, there's a natural tendency to this devotion and humility to serve life by aligning with what's the highest ideal. So only the pure ones were chosen to translate this because they themselves do not come from the karmic impressions of this world or the lower aspects of creation, which are still beautiful. They're just called the lower aspects or worlds of density because of the nature of experience here through that density taking form. So because we don't have, or we didn't have those impulses, we were originally chosen. However, this does not mean on our journey, like I said before, we would not have to undergo the entire process through our genetics, genetic clearing, ancestral karma, all of that. But remember the previous example I gave you, I shared with within the book as well, how Lucifer and what contributed to his fall, also the collective consciousness of what he was responsible. So imagine it's almost similar for great divine deities who, let's say, hold patternings of orbital forms, right? Life revolving around a certain way. So just like humans are responsible for their own subconscious patterns, each as an individual, these beings have the same purpose, except, like I said, it's happening in a wider format. So everything is applied to all aspects, except it depends on the width, right? The scope of things. So the light being integration is what creates this natural blending for us to become a true divine creator, ascending with form, not out of form. But several ascensions that are mentioned here, that those who had this path and experience like parallel ascensions, like I said, they're related also with several stargates. So each time they rised up a notch, Stargate speaking wise, right? Stargate wise speaking. I don't know how to term it, but either way, guys, stay focused. I'm still here, still speaking. Either way, once this was, reached in synthesis, this synthesis now for all these beings also a system that they are the advanced souls now who are ready to begin ascending with the body, or ascending the body, and becoming the inner dweller in completeness. No longer ascending as in transcending, but ascending as embodying. Okay, so the transcendence now becomes the embodiment. So this is a huge topic. I have so much to say. I'm already channeling much guidance these days. So it will all be in my Patreon course for the next month, which is soon. Until that time, I do have to give my body some space. I hope you enjoyed these messages, and I hope they were somehow informative for you. And don't forget, choose ascension no matter what, because eventually it's where life leads everyone. It's just a matter of time. So the more we resist it, the harder it is. There's something beautiful as well here in the book that we can read, where it's I think it's like a beautiful invitation or invocation. Let me see. And the poems this woman wrote, beautiful poems. I mean, each chapter closes with the poem. I mean, how awesome is that? I love poetry as well. I read a lot, but I don't share most of it. It's like I cried a lot when I read it, because it really resonated, and it gave a whole wider healing perspective and array to, you know, what was occurring. So where is that beautiful sentence that was at the end? And why can't I find it now? Because it was so beautiful. So it says, if you're not open to newness, you limit your own possibilities. Expand your world, let go of your paradigms, become a true rememberer and therefore a world bridger, dimensional traveler and anchor of the pillar of light through 9 dimensions here on earth. And most of all, remember it is a dream and the outcome is up to you. Look at this. Remember, it is your wake-up call. The alarm has gone off and the snooze button is inoperable. This is not a command or a threat. It is simply how it is. And I always say it like this. It's already the new cycle. People got to start working towards it, or they're just going to, you know, be lagging behind. And once the lag behind is too much, it's like we're feeling out of place. We're feeling out of tune. And that's where people are starting to feel this sense of void and despair, because it's coming. It's like it's a feeling of not moving forward. And those of us who are like very evolved beings who can work with tremendous amount of life force, we will feel those thoughts and feelings of others, and we will take them in as our own. And I'll tell you, it's scary to feel that way, because there's passageway into the new, and if you don't even take that first step, it will keep nagging at you, right? Like this constant snooze. I remember when I was still going to college, the snooze button was such a fake trick, because I felt even worse. You keep prolonging it and eventually say, I'm not going to class today. You know, it's like the ultimate set, like you preset yourself to fail, right? So your solar ring and planet are submerging themselves deeper and deeper into the photon band every moment of every day. Time is bending and stretching and changing. You might notice time lapses or accelerated time periods in which you accomplish half or twice of what you formerly did. The next day you might find yourself at the end of what should take many hours done in only an hour. You are in a time warp. As you become completely submerged in the photon band, this time warp will be even more pronounced. It will expand to include more dimensional warps as well. Some of you have already experienced a few of these. You're sitting in your chair reading a book. As you move from one line to the next, you suddenly realize you were in a city of light, temple, or inside the Sphinx or a Mayan ruin. You had a complete conversation with a higher dimensional being there, or a psychic opening, or perhaps you relived a past life. And all of this was literally done during the movement from one line or your book to the next. You shrug it off, you get full body confirmation chills, or you drop your book and close your eyes quickly so you can remember. You will become more and more lucid dreaming your waking hours of the dream in which you live. These dimensional warps or lucidity bleed-throughs will become more frequent as the photon energies increase. And of course, cosmic rays as a result of that. You will begin to hear your own past and future voices calling out to you in those moments in between breaths and thoughts, and between waking and sleeping. You will suddenly experience cellular awareness of being in a different body and in your current one at the same time. So this book is a beautiful, it's almost like a walk through the integration that's necessary for beings who were a part of this earthly evolutionary cycle or not. It doesn't matter. Like I said, we're all in it. Doesn't matter what aspect of creation you serve, it's all one creation. That's the important thing, because a lot of more advanced or evolved beings would say, that doesn't concern me. You know, I knew a few people like that. Like, I'm so above this. It doesn't concern me. I'm like, boy, it does concern you. And that thought in itself will come and nib you in the butt one day. You know, I don't know if that's the way it's called, but eventually things do come back to kick us right in the butt if we don't really approach these things with humility and reverence for all life as one. So, light being integration, something that I could talk about on and on, but let's do that on Patreon. We do lots more work there, so you're always invited to join in the team of light called Illumined Ascension. Enough talking for today, I think, y'all. So see you next time with so much love, wisdom, and power. And remember your greatness, even in the smallness, and ask the human self every day what it needs from the light being, and the light being what it needs from the human, and let that meet in the unity of one. I'll see you. Take care. Lots of care. Bye-bye.